Well, good morning. This is your time to respond. Good morning. My name is Kevin Barra, and I'm one of the pastors here at Grace. I actually oversee the youth ministry here. Have you guys had a good break? I think I need to infuse a little bit of energy back into us. Have you guys had a good break? You've got Christmas presents sitting at home. Some of them you haven't even played with yet, and you're still working through that. Others of you, you are excited about school starting tomorrow. Youth in the room, you get to start tomorrow. Yes, you're really pumped about that. This is the season of starting over. Whether you realize it or not, this is the season for starting over. And I want to talk this morning about what it looks like to start over. For us and our family, we are in the midst of a major restart, a major start over. We just had our fourth baby. We just called our fourth Quattro, and Quattro for a while because we didn't know the gender. We went surprise on number 4 because when fourth one's coming, you're in the pink car seat, you're wearing whatever's available. If you're healthy, we're happy. That's it, right? And so these are my 4 kids. The bigger daughter, that's Peyton. The son all the way to your left is Micah. Little Quatches right there. Her name is Juliet. And Jesse, and my other third son, or second son, whatever. How many do I got? He's over there on the right. 4 amazing kids, and we've restarted baby world, okay? Which means diapers and a lot of shaking of that child. My wife was there to the wee hours last night, shaking that baby. Not like but shaking the baby and calming her down. And so we're restarting, diapers, swaddling, staying up late. We are starting again this baby adventure. And you know what? You're probably in the midst of a restart. This season is the start of a restart. It's the start of a new year. And even if you're in the midst of a school year and you're like, no, I'm still a sophomore, Kevin. Well, whatever. You're still starting 2016. We made it. Some of you are going to restart the diet, right? Some of you are going to restart the exercise program. Some of you got some commitments you want to make at work, a recommitment there. Some of you are going to recommit to some obligations you want to fulfill with your family or in relationships that you have. And because it's a season of restarts, over this kind of Christmas break, I had a time to kind of reevaluate my year and to think about what I want to do this next year. I hope you've had that time. I actually had a beautiful place to do it. We went to my in-laws' place for a large part of my Christmas break, and they live in a beautiful home right there on this kind of lake. And so I'm sitting there in the backyard. It's about 82 degrees outside. I'm sunbathing right around Christmas, right? So it was a rough break for me. And as I'm sitting there, I'm going, okay, this is where I've been. This is where I want to go. Well, how do I get there? What do I want to do? What are my goals? What are my aspirations? What do I want to do? And as I'm sitting there, I'm a reader and a podcaster, and so I start reading and listening to other people that talk about how to restart or how to start new goals and how to achieve them. And they all basically said the same thing. These 4 pieces, they say this: write them down, review them daily, mark your progress, and make course corrections along the way. Every person I listened to, everyone I read said those 4 pieces, whether it was John Acuff or Forbes magazine or Michael Hyatt, all of them centered on these 4 steps. Write them down, review them daily, mark your progress, and make course corrections along the way. And I think this is great advice to achieve your goals, but it doesn't answer the more fundamental question that I was really asking. And it's this: where am I going? Where do I want my life to go? Not how can I achieve things, because there's different plans out there that can help you achieve goals. But I was asking a more fundamental question. Where am I going, and what do I need to do to get there? What's my ultimate goal in life? And I wanted to review that goal as I restarted, not just generally speaking, how do you achieve different goals you have? The famous coach Vince Lombardi at the beginning of every football season would start the same way. In fact, it was in July of 1961 that he sat down with his players right after they had lost the Super Bowl to the Philadelphia Eagles. And he walks into that locker room, and everyone had been thinking about the previous season, the previous loss, the whole summer. And as they're sitting there in the locker room, Vince Lombardi walks to the front of the room, picks up a football. In his famous speech, he says this: "Gentlemen, this is a football." And apparently one of the receivers in the room goes, "All right, slow down, coach." And what Vince Lombardi knew, forward, you have to reevaluate what it is you're trying to do to get back to the basics. I mean, all these guys knew what a football was, right? They just competed as pro athletes. They had just nearly won an NFL championship. They had played college ball, high school ball, Pop Warner. They had done it all. And in this moment, they needed to restart to say, what is it that we're trying to achieve here? And this morning, I just want to get back to the basics. The stuff that we're going to talk about this morning is nothing new, nothing radical, nothing you haven't heard. In fact, it's really here's a football moment. It's going back to the basics of what it looks like to start with God and to start this new year walking with God. And there's really just three pieces I want to give you from Genesis chapter 12. The first one is this, to start listening. Secondly, to start following. And third, to be ready for a restart. Start listening, start following, and number three, be ready for a restart. So if you have your Bibles, jump with us to Genesis chapter 12. I'm going to read for us, and then we're going to continue. In Genesis chapter 12, God's speaking to Abraham. And he says this, "Now the Lord said to Abram, 'Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. And I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you, and I will make your name great so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you I will curse. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed.' So Abraham went as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. Abraham was 75 years old when he departed from Haran." So the story opens up, or the moment opens up with the call of Abraham. It's one of the most significant moments in history. In fact, the three major world religions all trace their beginnings to this man, Father Abraham. And he had many sons. And many sons had Father Abraham, right? And I'm one of them, so are you, so let's just praise the Lord. So you've heard of this guy. He's famous. He's epic. He's known by the Muslims, the Jews, and the Christians. Everyone traces their roots to this guy in the major world religions of across the earth. And in the most significant moment of history, God speaks to a man. And he speaks to Abraham. He says, "Get up, go. Go from your father's house, go to the place I'm going to show you." And for many of us, as we hear that, we go, well, that was significant. That's Bible language. That's God speaking to a man. And as I'm talking about starting over in a new year, I think really there's three objections that many of us have to starting over, to really starting to listen to God. And the first objection I would say is this, is that I can't hear. If I had a voice speaking to me from heaven, saying, "Get up, go to Starbucks," I'd be like, "Yes, Lord," and you would kind of head your way. Or if I had a voice saying, "Get up, move to a lush paradise," you'd be like, "Oh, Hawaii, fine, Lord, I'll trust you in that," right? But many of us would say, I'm not getting the voice, Kevin. God isn't speaking to me that way. And I'll grant you that. God was speaking specifically to Abraham in a specific way for a specific purpose. And you know what? He doesn't speak to all of us in this way. But that doesn't mean that God isn't still speaking. In Psalm 19, it says this, that the heavens are declaring the glory of God. See, God is declaring his glory, who he is through the things that he has made. In Romans chapter 1, it says that Paul says the same thing. He says, everyone should know God because he has revealed himself through creation. You can look at the intricacies of outer space, the intricacies of creation of DNA, and you can look at that and say, there is a designer behind the design. There's something that he created, and there is something significant in that. In fact, some of the most brilliant scientists in the world, one of them, Francis Collins, who came up with studying the human DNA, looked at this structure and said, I see the glory of God as I study DNA structure. You can see the glory of God in creation. God is speaking through his world. But he didn't leave it there. God also, secondly, speaks through his word. Hebrews chapter 1 says this, that Jesus came to earth. John calls him the Word of God. He's the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. He has explained who the Father is. If you want to know what God is like and what he would say, just look at Jesus. But not only through the Word incarnate, through Jesus Christ, through his written word. Hebrews says of Scripture this, that the Word of God is living and active, sharper than any two-edged sword. It penetrates to dividing soul and spirit, joints and marrow. You spend time in this Word, and it will change you. You will hear God speaking to you. So you may not hear a voice from heaven calling you out, Joe, go. You may not hear that. But I'm confident that if you look in the world, you can see the work of God. And if you look in his word, you can get clarity into what God is calling you to. But I think the truth for most of us is not that we can't hear. It's that with what God is speaking, we may not want to listen. A famous philosopher, atheist philosopher, is a man named Thomas Nagel. He's a philosopher of law at New York University, where he's taught since 1980. And he says this, in speaking of the fear of religion, I do not mean to refer to the entirety of reasonable hostility towards certain established religions and religious institutions in virtue of their objectionable moral doctrines, social policies, and political influence. Nor am I referring to the association of many religious beliefs with superstition and the acceptance of evident empirical falsehoods. I'm talking about something much deeper, namely the fear of religion itself. I speak from experience, being strongly subject to this fear myself. Listen to this. I want atheism to be true, and I'm made uneasy by the fact that some of the most intelligent and well-informed people I know are religious believers. I want what I believe to be true. I don't want God to be speaking in the world. And in fact, I'm uncomfortable with the fact that a God of the universe would tell people how to live and what to do. See, I think the problem is not that we can't hear. It's for some of us that we don't want to hear what he's saying. The second excuse is this. For some of us, it feels like it's too late. And by that, you mean this. I'm too old or I'm too far gone. I'm too old or I'm too far gone. And there's a misconception I think that a lot of us have when we talk about a relationship with God or walking with God or hearing from God. And the misconception is this, that God only talks to certain people. He talks to good people, like good Christian, solid people. That's who he calls out. But what's so interesting about the call of Abraham is where he started. You see, he wasn't the pinnacle of perfection. He wasn't a moral person. In fact, Joshua tells us where Abraham was when God called him. In Joshua chapter 24, Joshua says this to the people. He stands in front of the people and says this, "Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, from ancient times your fathers lived beyond the river, namely Terah, the father of Abraham, and the father of Nahor. They served other gods." Look at that. They served other gods. "Then I took your father Abraham from beyond the river and led him through all the land of Canaan and multiplied his descendants and gave him Isaac." See what it says? Abraham wasn't looking for God. God was looking for Abraham. Abraham wasn't worshiping God. God brought him out of the place he was to lead him to the place he wanted him to be. You see, God doesn't pick perfect people. He just picks people. He doesn't pick people that are beautiful on the outside, great exteriors, right family, right upbringing. He just picks people. What are they doing? They're worshiping false gods in Babylon. That's where he is, in Ur of the Chaldeans. It was a large city, epically huge city, 24,000 people, one of the largest cities of that day and age, and they're worshiping false gods. And if you were to do a little bit of research about what worship looked like back then, you would be offended. It was sexually perverse, it was violent, and in that moment, in this dark past, God calls this guy. You're never too far gone, and it's never too late. Read verse 4 of Genesis 12. How old is old Abe? 75 years old. He was not a spring chicken, okay? He had lived life. He had a journey of life. He had a career in life. He had a direction his life was going. He was 75 years old, and God says, you know what, buddy? Let's move. Let's go somewhere else. Let's get up and join with me. And the third excuse comes up, and I would say this, it's probably this for many of us, it's too hard. And you know what? You're absolutely right. And you know what? It was hard for Abraham too. Following God, listening to God is always hard. If you're taking notes, just write, it's hard. It is. It completely is. And you know what? It was hard for Abraham too. And I would argue it may have even been harder for him. Because he tells him, I want you to leave your country in verse 2, and to leave your kindred, and to leave your father's house. He tells him first, leave your country. That means you leave what's familiar to you. Leave your hometown. Leave all the things that you know, and leave your kindred. He's saying, leave what's safe. See, in this culture, in this time, if you lived basically in a clan mentality. You looked out for your people. Everyone was basically related. Abraham married like his stepsister, kind of weird relationship there. Everyone was very close back in the day. What was the purpose? Because that was safety. You looked after your family, the people closest to you. And he says, look, not only do you leave your country, your kindred, you also leave your father's house. You leave the ones you love most. You leave those people that are closest to you. And I tell you what, the call of God is always hard. But the call of God never leaves you alone. See, there's 5 statements in this section that where God says, I will. It's perfect. Go to the land that I will show you. I will make you a great name. I will bless you. I will protect you. I will be there for you. And every moment along the way, God says, I will provide for you along this journey. And if you listen to God, He doesn't send you off on your own. There's always an I will accompanying it. God will be with you, and God will walk with you, but He does call you to get up and start listening to Him. And if you listen to Him, if you hear Him, the second step is simple and hard. Start following. Start following. And what God does next in the life of Abraham is He pulls him up and He brings him into 2 major challenges. There's a cultural challenge and a trust challenge. The first challenge is cultural. They get up and they start walking, but what's so interesting is they only walk halfway. See, the problem is really on follow-through. Now, if you see this map, I'm showing you where Ur is in this bottom right-hand corner. This is the area of Babylon, a metropolitan area of the day. And the call occurs to Abraham in this place. In fact, in Acts chapter 7, in Stephen's sermon, he references that God called him in Ur, and he traveled up to Haran. He made that journey upward. Now, the place where he was trying to get is this larger area where the kind of the purple arrow is directing this Negev, the Kadesh Barnea. That area was the place where he was supposed to go. And he moved from Ur up to Haran. Now, why didn't he just walk straight across? Well, that's the great desert. That's the Arabian desert. You die if you walk straight across. So you followed the water route up north to work your way back south. And they get to Haran, and what's so interesting is they stop there. And Abraham had packed up his dad and his son or his nephew, and they had made this trek, and they're sitting there, and they waited there until Terah died. Abraham's dad died. He got halfway. Well, what was in Haran? You know what was there? Comfort. In Haran, there was a center of moon worship. One of the major centers of worship, both in Babylon, in Haran, was this moon worship of God. It was a cultural community that they were very familiar with. And so it was like God said, get up and go. He's like, I'm going to go where it's comfortable. Get up and go to the hard places. All right, I'm going to leave Bryan and move all the way to College Station. Like, oh, okay, yeah, that's great. Really risking it there, right? He says, get up and go. And he goes halfway, and he's sitting there, and then God speaks again to him. He says, get up, leave, move. And in chapter 4, he finally gets up again. Verse 4 of chapter 12. It says, so Abraham went as the Lord told him, and Lot went with him. And Abraham was 75 years old when he departed from Haran. And Abraham took Sarah his wife, and Lot his brother's son, and all the possessions that they had gathered, and the people that they had acquired in Haran, and they set out to the land of Canaan. And when they came to the land of Canaan, Abraham passed through the land to the place of Shechem, the oak of Moreh. Now, at that time, the Canaanites were in the land. Okay, that's a clue. You got to clue in on it. At that time, the Canaanites were in the land. Who are the Canaanites? We'll get there, but that's a clue. Then the Lord appeared to Abraham and said, to your offspring I'll give this land. So he built there an altar to the Lord who had appeared to him. And from there he moved to the hill country east of Bethel and pitched his tent with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. And there he built an altar to the Lord and called upon the name of the Lord. And Abraham journeyed on, still going toward the Negeb. And so Abraham finally starts walking. His dad passes, and he begins to start moving south. And where God leads him next is actually very interesting in chapter 12. He leads them into a place of occupied territory. He leads them to a center where people are already there. The Canaanites are there. In fact, if you're familiar with the Bible at all, that's the enemy, the proven enemy of Israel. They're going to be a problem the entire life of the nation of Israel. They're always going to be there, and they're always going to be a problem. And what's so interesting is that God doesn't lead him to a peaceful place. He leads them to a new challenge. You see, not only are we supposed to follow through, but we're supposed to follow through in the culture he puts us. See, following God means I want you to follow me in the midst of a diverse, challenging culture. Over this Christmas season, I spent some time with my sister. My sister lives in California. She lives kind of outside of the Bay Area, and she works for an engineering firm there. And she was talking about at the end of the year where they had this party that was going on, and two of the managers of the company got together, and they were going in halvesies to provide this kind of holiday party for the staff and the work people. And so they're there together, and so one of the guys basically pays, the other guy just runs with the planning. And so she's telling me this story, and she says, yeah, one of the guys was Jewish, he was the guy paying, and the guy planning was the Christian, and they were both paying partially. And so they get to the party, and the Christian had purchased a ham, called it a Christmas party, and had all like these holiday decorations. And she was friends with the other manager, and so they walk in there, and the Jewish guy, he wasn't belligerent or anything. He was just kind of like, I don't even know if I should go. He receives the invitation. He's like, hey, yeah, we're going to have, honey-baked ham and Christmas decorations. Merry Christmas. And the guy was like, I don't even know if I should be there. And it just felt awkward. And if in our culture, in our world, in our country, we're becoming head-to-head with more and more cultural, religious diversity. I was talking to a friend of mine who lives over here in Castlegate, right? Not exactly crazy, Northern Cal, right? So Castlegate. And he was telling me about the variety of religious people that live around him. There's some Muslims there. There's some Asian folks that are atheists. And he's just telling me about the variety of people living right around him, their variety of lifestyles. And even here, in the midst of conservative College Station, Texas, God is bringing people from other places with other belief systems to this culture. For some of you, God is calling you to go, to get up and leave. For others of you, God is just calling you to do the crazy, dramatic step of just living a faithful life in your community. And what does that mean? It means you live a life that's unapologetically Christian. Does that mean that you need to get hams and invite your Jewish friends? Well, I think Peter actually gives us a lot of wisdom in this. And in 1 Peter, Peter says this way, but in your hearts honor Christ as Lord, as holy, always being prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you for the reason of hope that is in you, yet do it with gentleness and respect. Do this with gentleness and respect. Have you set apart as Christ as Lord in your heart? Are you willing to follow him wherever he's leading? And as you follow him, are you doing that with gentleness and respect? Are you respecting their beliefs, respecting their lifestyle, respecting some decisions that they're making, but being unapologetically Christian in the midst? See, Abraham did that. See what it says that Abraham did? It says he went to the oak of Moriah. That was a religious symbol of their day, a large tree that had religious, spiritual implications to those cultures. And in the midst of that religious place, he built his own little altar to God. And then he traveled a little bit further along, and he began worshiping, calling on the name of God. You know what it means to follow God in this culture? It means you get up and walk, and wherever you land, you are unapologetically Christian. You live fully for Christ in the place that God has put you. That means you pray. That means you encourage. That means you throw a Christmas party, invite people from other places, other religions, other backgrounds, but maybe you make it really clear that I'm fitting the dime for this. You don't have to pay for this. You come join with me as I worship my God. So you start following in the place that God has put you. And number 3, you get ready for a restart. And you know this is true. Every commitment you make, everything you start requires restarts along the way. Every great decision you make to go do something will require moments when you've got to reevaluate. You see, there was 2 challenges that God laid right in front of Abraham. First was the cultural challenge. Are you going to worship me in the midst of this culture? And secondly, it's a trust challenge. Will you worship me? Will you trust me in the midst of a very awkward situation, in fact, a very tough situation? And what happens to Abraham in verse 10 of chapter 12, it says this: now there was a famine in the land. And so Abraham went down to Egypt there, for the famine was severe. In verse 10, it says there's a famine that hits. And in this world, in this culture, famines were horrible. They set the stage for everything. People didn't eat if there was not water coming at the right times. And what Abraham says is, look, we got to get some food. We got to get out of here. I know God said to stay here, and I was worshiping him, and I was calling on him. But look, stuff's getting tough. Let's start walking south. Let's go to Egypt. And all throughout the Bible, Egypt is the place where people go when they're not trusting God. And he starts walking south to Egypt. In fact, this is exactly where he went. He went to Zohar, right there in Egypt, all the way to the left. And he stood there and waited. Now, before we read all that Abraham did in this moment, all the mistakes that he made, I just want to say one thing. Before we're too hard on Abraham, I just want you to realize that we've all made mistakes in our life. And he's going to make some major mistakes with his wife. Now, I just want you to think about, married men, the dumb things you have said to your wife over the years. Or guys, if you've ever dated a girl, the ridiculously poor things that you have said in that moment. And I just reflected on myself. What are the dumb things that I've said to my wife over time? And we've said these to each other. And the first one is this: it's your turn to change the diaper. Like we're paying each other back, right? Or this is horrible. Here, you taste, right? Or as I'm sitting downstairs watching TV, hey, can you see why the kids are screaming upstairs? Okay, trying to sleep. Or something like this: take out the trash. It's disgusting. There's no way I'm touching it, right? See, those are bad things to say to a wife. But that's nothing compared to what Abraham does to his wife in this moment. He's scared. He's not trusting God, and this whole thing snowballs. In verse 11, it says this: now, when they're about to enter Egypt, he said to his wife, Sarah, his wife, I know that you are a woman beautiful in appearance. Well, that's really sweet, Kevin. What are you talking about? Now, when the Egyptians see you, they will say, this is his wife, and they will kill me, but they'll let you live because you're hot. say you are my sister, that it may go well with me because of you, and that my life may be spared for your sake. What? Okay, God just promised him land, seed, and blessing. Go from this place. I'm going to give you this land. It's going to be awesome. Okay, famine hits. I'm going to Egypt. He looks over at his wife. Hey, baby, you're beautiful. She's like, oh, Abe. He's like, no, seriously, you're a knockout. You're hot. You're like too hot. Like I should have married the ugly girl with the nice personality on the street. Like you're way too hot. Like people would kill for a girl like you. Literally, they'll kill me if they see you. So here's the plan, baby. Here's the plan. Okay, just go with me on this. We're going to get down there, and you just say you're my sister, and it's going to go good with me. They're going to give me camels and such, and he's going to marry you off. You go to his like, a harem. It's going to be great. Can you imagine what Sarah's thinking in this moment? Where's like the brave guy that led us on this adventure, right? Where's my knight in shining armor that was following God in the midst of this culture that was leading us here? Like, where is that guy? Oh, yeah, he's in the fetal position on the corner, right? Like, that's where Abe is at this moment. He's like, babe, let's just see what happens, okay? Okay? I mean, you've got to get yourself from the gritty realism of the Bible. Sometimes we read the Bible and we just kind of pass over like, I guess he was following God. No, he wasn't. And he's going to get called out on it here in a second. And so they go down, verse 14, and Abraham went to the land of Egypt, and when the Egyptians saw that the woman was very beautiful, and when the prince of Pharaoh saw her, he praised her to Pharaoh, and the woman was taken into Pharaoh's house, and for her sake he dealt well with Abram, and he had sheep and male donkeys and oxen and servants and female servants. It's very sweet. And camels. Camels, Abe. This worked out really well for you. You know what? Sometimes detouring from the plan that God has for your life actually could end in your benefit. You could get a lot of camels and miss the call of God. You can get a lot of benefits, but it just costs you your wife. See, the truth is following God is always hard. And the Bible shows the gritty realism of men that are called to great things, but make some great mistakes along the way. See, it's real. It's real. And as they get there in this moment, I got to think that Abraham's going, what did I do? I was doing this great thing, great plans. I've got a lot of camels. Everyone's kind of patting my back, but I just sold out the plan of God. Have you been there? Have you made one of the biggest mistakes of your life, and maybe it even turned out in your favor, and you're sitting there going, I got what I most wanted, but I disobeyed the call of God? One of the most significant moments in my life was when I was running track in college. And I ran track, and I was training, spending all of my energy, all of my time, all of my effort toward this goal to run this race and stand on that podium. Everything for that. And I remember I went to Stanford, and it was the qualifying race in order to qualify for the NCAA championships. And I'm running the race. I get through. I look at the time, 8:45 in the steeplechase. It was the time I needed to run to run at the NCAA championships. I'm over there by a grate, puking in the grate with a smile on my face, like I made it, like so excited that I'd made it. I'd sold everything for this. And we get to the NCAA championships. It's in Louisiana. It's like 98 degrees in the shade in Louisiana. And we're there, and we get to the race. We're about to run the prelims, and I feel this emptiness in me. I'm going, I sold everything for this, and I feel completely empty. And I run the race. I don't make the final. And that summer, I went to Colorado to spend some time with my brother and my cousin and some family there. And at one point, he tells me, hey, go out on this road and just run on this road. And here's the deal on this road. Just stay on the main path. Because if you go out to the right, to the left, it'll kind of dead end. So I just want you to stay on the main path of this dirt road. And I was like, all right. And so I go start running. And I just start praying as I'm running. I'm like, God, what's going on? I had achieved everything I wanted. yet I just feel lost. And God brought into my mind a verse from Joshua where he says, stay on the path. Don't turn from the right or to the left, but stay with me. And I just felt like the sweet conviction of God saying, you've been running everywhere but to me. Literally, you run, your distance, you run. But you haven't been running to me. And it was at that moment I went, okay. All right, Lord. I can get everything and miss the one thing that you're calling me to. I can start over and make goals and make plans, and this is what I want to achieve, but miss the big thing that God is calling you to. And in that moment, God calls up Abraham, and he brings him back on course. In verse 17, it says, but the Lord afflicted Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarai, Abram's wife. And so Pharaoh called Abram and said, what is this that you have done to me? Why did you not tell me that she was your wife? Why did you say she was my sister? The pagan Pharaoh is calling Abram out for not being a good Christian. Like, do you see what's going on here? Why did you say she was my sister? Now then, here's your wife. Take her, leave. And Pharaoh gave orders to the men concerning him. And he sent him away, him and his wife, and all that he had. You see what's so great about this moment is that when he blows it, God's right there to scoop up and lead him in the place where he needs to go. See, every start requires a restart. And there's never a moment when you are too far gone for what God wants to do in your life. No one is. You see, God calls the people that are imperfect, not pretty, that make mistakes even along the way. But even in the midst of the mistake, God still calls you back to himself to go where he wants you to go. One of my favorite New Testament moments happens in the life of Peter. And Peter was the ready, fire, aim kind of guy, right? There was a moment when he's there with the disciples, and Jesus asked, who do the people say that I am? And Peter says, you're the Christ, the Son of the living God. It was an epic moment for Peter. He's like, did you hear that, people? He looks around, and Jesus says, blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, because God himself has revealed this to you. And he's like, that's what I'm talking about. And a little bit later on, he's going there, and Jesus is telling him, hey, the Christ must suffer and die. And Peter goes, look, all these dudes may abandon you, but I'm Peter, buddy. The Rock. You gave me that name. I'm living it out. I'm awesome. We're gonna do this thing. And they come to arrest Jesus. He picks up a sword, like, we're gonna do this, and he chops off a guy's ear. You know, he wasn't always a thinker. You know, he's like swinging for a guy and gets a lobe. You know, like he wasn't always thinking it through, but he was bold, right? He was passionate. And they take Jesus away, and then Peter doesn't know what happened. He never thought he'd be in this position. And when he's there in that moment, it says he came to a charcoal fire. And he's warming himself by the fire, and he can see Jesus just off to the side. And there's a little girl who says to him, hey, aren't you one of the disciples? He's like, no, I don't know what you're talking about, little girl. Go away, you know? And then one of the soldiers kind of pipes in, like, no, listen to your accent. You're one of the guys from Galilee. And he's like, no way. And he's like, no, you're one of the guys. I remember seeing you with Jesus. And he starts cussing to show that he had no part of Jesus. He's like dropping F-bombs in front of the church. I don't know what he's talking. And then he sees Jesus out of the corner of his eye. And Jesus kind of looks at him. It says that Peter wept and ran. And then 3 days later, Jesus rose from the dead, right? And he appears to Peter and to the 12. He appears to all of them and says, hey, follow me, Peter. I'm still alive. Look at my hands, Thomas. Touch them. Like, we're in this. And he says, go wait for me in Galilee. And they travel up to Galilee. And as they're there in Galilee waiting, he tells the boys, I'm going fishing. And a couple of the guys go with him. Now, Peter was a fisherman. To say I'm going fishing doesn't mean like, hey, want to kill some time? Let's just go out and cast, see what we get. You know, like that's not the moment. He's saying, we've been doing this thing. Let's just go fishing. And they're off on the boat, and they hear a voice from the side. Little little boys, which is so derogatory, you know? If anyone was to call you like a little boy, you'd be like, okay, it's on, right? And they look over and go, you haven't caught anything, have you? It's like, who is this guy? Little boy. Throw the net on the other side. And they throw the net on the other side, and they bring in a great quantity of fish. And John turns to Peter and says, that's Jesus. This is your miracle. This is when Jesus first called you to follow him. This is your moment. Jesus is recreating the moment of your calling. And it says that Peter jumped out and started swimming to shore, right? And then John says, and the rest of us just kind of rowed because we weren't that far from land. But Peter was in, right? And he swims his way over there, and he gets in front of the charcoal fire, and Jesus already has fish slid up ready to go for them. He's already cooked it up, and they're sitting there in front of the fire. And then Jesus says to him, hey, Peter, hey, you love me more than these? You see, Jesus goes right to the heart of the issue. You denied me 3 times. But Jesus, Peter, do you love me? Peter says, yeah, you know I love you. Then feed my sheep. He says to him again, hey Peter, you love me more than these. Peter goes, yeah, hey, Jesus, you know I love you. Then feed my sheep. And he says to him a 3rd time, Peter, hey, Peter, come here. Do you love me more than these? At that point, Peter gets agitated, as you would. When your kids ask you a question 3 times, the buddy keeps on asking you, hey, you're going to be there, you're going to be there, you're going to be there. You're like, shoo, you know I love you, right? And Peter says, listen to me. When you were younger, you got to go and walk wherever you wanted to go. But when you get older, someone's going to pick you up by the hand and lead you where you don't want to go. And John says that he told Peter this, signaling the type of death he would have. Like, hey, you follow me. I want everything. I'm going to lead you where I want you to be, not where you want to be. I'm going to lead you to the place that you're going to be most significant to the things I'm doing in the world. You follow me. And then Peter looks over at John, sitting next to him, and goes, hey, what about that guy? And Jesus says, psst, you follow me. We got communion this morning. The men, if you can get up and go prepare it. But I just want to leave us with a couple questions as you think about this restart for this new year. The first question I would ask you is this: are you ready for a restart? Are you ready to start over? Are you ready to look ahead of this new year and say, you know what? I feel like I want to start listening. I really want to start following. I really want to go where he's leading. Are you ready to start listening to God? Well, how do I do that, Kevin? Well, I'll just tell you this. We've got Bible studies this semester. We've got home groups this semester. We've got tons of opportunities for you to get plugged in. But secondly, are you going to do it on your own? Are you going to carve out time to listen to God, to get along with him? Are you ready to start following God? Some of you have gone halfway in life. You've kind of done just enough to be in the Christian crew, but haven't really sold out to really walk with him. For some of you, to start over this year might be for you to really follow God to where he's leading. Or some of you are just ready to restart. You've blown it. You've made some mistakes this past year that you'd say, Kevin, if you knew my past, if you knew what I was doing, if you knew, I can't restart. The words to Peter are the same as Jesus' words to you. Do you love me? Jesus, you know I love you. Do you love me? Then feed my sheep. Join me. Get back on track. Come with me and go where I'm going to lead you. And pray for us as the men bring up the elements. Lord, thank you so much for this morning. And Lord, I know that for all of us, if we know you, Jesus, if you've called us to yourself, then you've called us to follow you. And so, Lord, I pray that we might reflect right now of where we want to have our new start this year. Is it enlisting better? Is it following through with where you're leading us? Or Lord, is it just to really restart because we've blown it along the way? Lord, I pray as we reflect on that, we'd reflect on what you've given for us, everything. Hear me pray. Amen.